My name is Captain Reed Lawson. I'm 38 years old, a military strategist with 16 years of service, and until recently, I thought I knew where I stood in this institution. I thought a clean record, successful missions, and tactical consistency meant something. But 3 weeks ago, they moved my office. Not up to command, not even to a joint operations hub. They sent me to a room behind the base's supply bay, wedged between expired rations and rusted shelving. The place didn't have a window, just a buzzing overhead light and a desk that had seen better wars. I could still smell bleach and cardboard every time I sat down. That was the moment it hit me. They weren't promoting me, they were shelving me, quietly, politely, like a formality that no one wanted to talk about. After everything I'd contributed, they didn't say I'd failed. They didn't say anything. They just shifted me out of sight. I'd planned extraction protocols in hostile terrain, coordinated rescue efforts with less than 30 minutes of satellite feed, and ran logistics for one of the largest NATO war games of the last decade. Now my job was to evaluate training simulations, read and update route maps for drills that never changed. The phone barely rang. The silence was louder than gunfire. At first, I told myself it was temporary. Maybe restructuring. Maybe someone needed the space upstairs. But then I saw the new guy they gave my old office to. A civilian analyst, fresh from some defense consultancy, barely past 30, still wore his visitor badge upside down. He brought a standing desk and an espresso machine. He didn't salute when he passed. I asked no questions, just nodded and kept walking. That's what we're taught, right? Keep your mouth shut, do your duty, and the system will see you. But the system had stopped looking at me long ago. I was dependable. I was consistent. But apparently, I wasn't visible anymore. The part that cut deepest wasn't the room. It was what it meant. That I had become furniture. That after over a decade of precision, discipline, and sacrifice, someone up the chain had decided I was safer collecting dust than making decisions. And no one had the courage to say it out loud. There's a special kind of quiet in that storage side office. The kind where you hear yourself think too clearly. At first, it echoed with confusion, then disappointment. Now, it hums with something else, something sharper. Because I haven't changed. My instincts haven't dulled. And if they think putting me next to mops and surplus canisters will make me forget who I am, they've got another thing coming. I'm Captain Reed Lawson, and I'm not done yet. His name was Lieutenant Evan Hartley. 32 years old, West Point pedigree, chin high, smile tight. He walked into the morning briefing like a man expecting applause. The colonel introduced him like he was the answer to every problem we didn't know we had. Strategic lead for the upcoming theater simulation, emphasis on lead. Then came my assignment, support, technical oversight, background work. I could feel the words slide across the table like a paper cut. Hartley thanked the colonel with a handshake so polished I could see the prep school in his knuckles. He used phrases like operational synergy and tactical fluidity. He didn't mention deployment time. He didn't need to. The man had never seen dust on his boots. I watched him take a seat at the head of the table, open his tablet, and scroll through pre-digested summaries. He wasn't reading. He was performing. Every nod, every click, calibrated. I'd seen men like him before. High shine, low depth. In the hall later, he caught up to me, told me he'd heard good things. Said he looked forward to jamming with me. I wasn't sure what jamming meant in a combat scenario, but I nodded. That's what you do when they hand you the broom and tell you the house needs cleaning. By the end of week 1, I'd been left off every strategy call. My insights were rerouted through staffers. My old mission analysis folders had been accessed. No credit, no mention. Just my fingerprints in the margins of his presentations. Hartley took my heat maps and wrapped them in buzzwords. Risk tolerance became operational appetite. Contingency plan became adaptive decision lane. He turned real-world math into TED Talk filler. People nodded. They always nod when someone talks fast and smiles often. Meanwhile, I was fielding late-night pings from junior officers trying to decode what any of it meant in actual ground terms. They couldn't. It didn't. One evening, I found him standing by the digital table, rehearsing a pitch to brass. He swiped to one of my diagrams, paused, changed a title from Forward Perimeter Threat Zones to Dynamic Exposure Quadrants. I didn't interrupt, I watched. Then I walked out. What got me wasn't just the theft, it was the ease. The way he moved through the space like it had always been his. The way people leaned in when he talked, like charisma was competence. I wanted to believe the mission would sort things out, that somewhere in the grind of prep, truth would surface. But the deeper we got, the clearer it became. This wasn't about merit. It was theater. And I'd been handed a backstage pass. I didn't say anything to the colonel, didn't file a grievance. The military teaches you how to hold your tongue tighter than your weapon, so I held it, hard. But every word Hartley said, every file he touched, every time he sidestepped responsibility with a grin and a catchphrase, I logged it. Not officially, not yet. I've lived long enough in this uniform to know how games are played. But what he didn't know was that I've seen men win battles before they even begin. And I was already drawing my map. It started with a simple request. Hartley popped his head into my doorway, casual as always, asking if I could send over my preliminary drafts for the urban engagement layout. He framed it as wanting to get aligned early, said he respected my ground instincts. I sent them, labeled, dated, marked draft only. 3 days later, I sat in the back of the conference room while he walked through his latest operational update. Same grid, same sector flow, even the same unit notations I always used. The only thing that had changed was the header. My name was gone. His was there. No one blinked. Not the colonel, not the captains flanking him. They nodded as Hartley spoke, soaking in his polished delivery. I watched the screen like I was seeing a painting I'd done, hanging in someone else's house. Hartley clicked through slide after slide, built entirely on the bones I gave him. I didn't interrupt, didn't shift in my chair. I let it happen. And while he talked about offensive pressure corridors like he'd mapped them himself, I was already thinking ahead. I'd suspected this would come. That smile of his was too easy. His tone too practiced. He wasn't here to collaborate. He was here to harvest. What he didn't realize was I'd already built a shadow folder. The real simulations, with accurate timestamps, full change logs, and draft metadata tied to my login. Every single diagram he lifted had a trail behind it. Every map had an original version with my footprint etched into the system. The military taught me more than tactics. It taught me how to document without drawing fire. I made sure the files he touched looked just polished enough to use, but not enough to withstand scrutiny. A few quiet flaws buried deep in logic. Not enough to alert him, just enough to trip him if he tried to run with it. Hartley didn't see it. He never looked deeper than the surface. And as the room clapped at the end of his deck, I sat back and nodded with them. Calm, silent, already 3 moves ahead. I spent most of a Saturday building the decoys. 6 tactical layouts, each one more polished than the last. Clean lines, crisp overlays, embedded callouts that looked pulled straight from doctrine. The kind of work that made surface thinkers nod. But underneath, each one hid a flaw. In Route Alpha, I placed an insertion path along a ravine that had flooded in last year's spring rains. The soil profile alone would trap vehicles like quicksand. Bravo had a comms relay station marked in a zone that hadn't been cleared for satellite visibility in 3 years. Charlie used outdated elevation models from an old disaster drill. Hartley wouldn't know. He never looked at contour accuracy. Delta routed medevac through a corridor that would have crossed with active artillery range during real-time drills. Echo had overlapping fire arcs that risked blue-on-blue engagement if anyone followed it as is. Foxtrot? That one was my favorite. It featured a beautiful flanking maneuver, perfectly timed, perfectly aligned with a civilian market that had been rebuilt after an old conflict. Nothing in it screamed sabotage. Everything in it whispered incompetence, the kind you don't question until it's too late. I saved each map with a standard header, exported them with high-res legends, and tucked them into a folder titled Readiness Review, Hartley. He downloaded all 6 the next morning, didn't even message me. Just pulled the files and rebranded them. Changed the initials on the doc properties. That was fine. I wanted him to own them. What made it satisfying wasn't just the theft, it was the certainty. He didn't have the eye, couldn't see the details that mattered. He thought strategy was aesthetics, and I made sure it looked beautiful. Elegant traps, designed to fail just enough to expose the fool presenting them. I watched him showcase 2 of them later that week. Room full of brass, screen glowing with my diagrams. Not one correction, not one pause. He had no idea he was marching right into his own ambush. And all I had to do was sit still, let the room believe, and wait for the moment when truth would hit like a detonation. Hartley stood at the front of the room, sleeves rolled, pointer in hand, eyes bright with confidence. The screen behind him glowed with Route Delta, the one with the medevac disaster baked in. He launched into his pitch like it was gospel. Every movement was choreographed, every word smooth. He didn't notice the tension shift. Second row, Lieutenant Vega leaned forward, brow pinched, eyes narrow. She raised a hand, asked why medevac was routed through a live-fire corridor. Hartley blinked, smiled, said the data had been vetted, mumbled something about field conditions being reassessed. Vega didn't back down, neither did the 2 junior analysts behind her. Captain Dorsey followed, asked about the Echo Route's engagement zones, said the crossfire path overlapped with the Alpha Unit's exfil window. Hartley waved it off, said those zones were dynamic. That's when I saw it, the crack in his voice, the hesitation. He looked at his notes, then the map, then back again. Brigadier Marshall sat with his arms crossed, not blinking. He hadn't spoken yet, but I could feel the weight of his silence. Hartley shifted to Route Bravo, tried to change the subject, droned on about terrain leverage and movement fluidity. Someone in the back muttered that the terrain data was 4 years out of date. Now the room was shifting, posture stiff, side glances everywhere. Hartley pressed on, faster now, less polished, more breathless. He didn't hear himself unraveling, but we all did. He was cornered, and he didn't even realize it yet. One final question came from Major Lynn. Calm, sharp, asked why the insertion zone on Alpha overlapped the floodplain from last year's operation. Hartley froze, looked at the screen like it had betrayed him. Then, he tried again, said adjustments had been made, repeated that the data had passed review. No one responded. The silence that followed was heavy. You could feel it hanging between the clacks of his remote and the hum of the projector. Hartley turned back to the crowd, smiled again, but this time, no one smiled back. The veneer had cracked, and behind it was nothing but borrowed work and a man who'd never seen the edges of what he claimed to lead. The colonel turned to me without raising his voice. Just a simple question. Captain Lawson, can you clarify these discrepancies? I stood, straightened my uniform, and walked to the front without looking at Hartley. My hands were steady, my mind already 10 steps ahead. I pulled the flash drive from my pocket, slid it into the port. The screen flickered once, then filled with the real data. Actual terrain overlays, updated comms, clearance maps, clean simulations layered with timestamps and proper elevation tags. There was no drama in my voice, just facts laid out in order. First, I showed the original drafts, each one marked as preliminary, each one dated, logged, and submitted through my credentials. Then, I clicked open the admin panel, displayed file access history, every instance of Hartley downloading the maps, every rename, every time he stripped the metadata and dropped in his initials. One by one, the room saw it. I turned toward Major Lynn, handed her a printed log. She flipped through the pages, quietly. No commentary, just confirmation. The evidence spoke louder than any accusation ever could. I didn't gloat, didn't smirk. I kept my voice level, my tone even. The projector displayed Hartley's name, tied to every change on those decoys. It was all there. The proof, the theft, the misuse. The silence in the room deepened. not out of confusion, but recognition. Everyone saw it now. Brigadier Marshall leaned forward, asked one final question. "Captain, are these the models we should be using?" I nodded once. "Sir, they're the ones that'll keep our people alive." He said nothing more, just nodded back. Hartley didn't speak. He just stared at the floor like it had answers. But it didn't. His story had played out. Mine had just shifted. I walked back to my seat, not with victory in my chest, but with something heavier. Validation. After months of being sidelined, stripped, and silenced, I didn't need applause. Just the truth landing in the room. And that day it landed hard. The order came in quietly, without ceremony. Just a formal memo slid across my desk with a single line at the top. Effective immediately, Captain Reed Lawson is assigned full mission command. I read it twice, not because I didn't believe it, but because part of me had stopped expecting recognition a long time ago. I didn't go out and celebrate, no big speeches. Just sat back in my chair, let the moment settle. The weight of it wasn't flashy. It felt like something solid finally locking into place. Something earned, not granted. The next morning, I met with operations and requested full discretion to assemble my own team. I wasn't interested in stars or headlines. I wanted quiet professionals. People who had been overlooked, passed by, forgotten like I had. I found them in supply bays, data units, recon posts. Analysts who never made it past E6 but could run circles around any war college grad. There was Staff Sergeant Elena Marks, who once rebuilt a shattered route map in the middle of a sandstorm using nothing but a busted tablet and 3 lines of comms. Sergeant Diaz, who could scan satellite heat readings and predict convoy ambushes before they even made the ridge. And Lieutenant Connor, a kid who barely spoke but coded faster than anyone I'd seen in 15 years. We didn't need buzzwords, we needed clarity. So I laid out our real objectives. Clean data, tactical logic, zero fluff. Every mission file passed through triple review. Every simulation tested, retested, then stripped of anything that looked like ego. And the thing that stayed with me most? They looked me in the eye, every single one of them. Not because they feared me, but because they trusted I wouldn't waste them. That mattered more than any title ever could. We moved like a machine, quiet, precise. When the operation launched, it ran clean. No surprises, no losses, no scrambling under fire. Just efficiency born of people who finally had space to do their jobs the right way. A week after we returned, a sealed envelope showed up on my desk, handwritten, from the deputy commander himself. It didn't ramble, just a short note in careful script. "Thank you for leading with integrity. We need more of that." I framed it, not because I need to show it off, but because sometimes, when a long fight ends, it's good to have something that reminds you it was worth it. And now, my new office has light, a solid door. And when I walk the hall, people nod, not out of obligation, but because finally they see me, and I see them too.